Hello, this is another episode of Umwe Sit Downs. I am your host, Brian Nakambonde, and today I am joined by Dr. Osha. Dr. Osha, welcome to the show. Please tell me, just say a neat hello and tell me where you're calling me from today, because we found out we're much closer than we thought.
Yes, thank you so much. I could say good morning to you, particularly, but to our viewers, hello everybody. I'm speaking from Cape Town in South Africa. And this is a bright, sunny morning, even though it's winter, but it's bright and sunny here.
Cape Town, South Africa. There we have it. Yep. I originally thought Dr. Osha is calling me from New Zealand for some reason, but I'm glad we clarified that. Well, Dr. Osha, you are a very, I think for me, an interesting man so far without talking to you because of a very, I think, uh, a piece that you wrote about the N-word, right? That I think any Black community around the world will be very keen to and sort of learn a lot from reading it. You know, your article did a phenomenal job sort of describing how complex the N-word is and how it evolved culturally in the American context, you know, where it of course originates from. But I wanted to sort of talk with you and sort of now kind of bring and look at that at the N-word in the African context. And one question that remained for me as I read your article is, what are significant differences between what the N-word means to an African in Lagos, Nigeria, or South Africa rather, versus now an African American from Atlanta, Georgia? You know, what are the key significant differences between what that word means to those characters that I just drew up for you?
Thank you so much for a very insightful and thought-provoking question. It's a very important one, certainly, and it's a question we have to always examine and debate to get better clarity of our situation as Africans, as descendants of Africans, wherever we are in various parts of the world. And as we combat the question of racism, white supremacy in this age of Black Lives Matter and in the post Rhodes Must Fall era, and so many other challenges we face as Black people working to better a lot globally on the systems of oppression, really. Yes, when you say the N word, it's particularly poignant in the US and places where you have entrenched systems of white domination, you know. And so and because it was used in a very oppressive manner, it was a word of dehumanization to dehumanize Black people, especially in the U.S. and perhaps in the yes, particularly in the U.S. And other Western contexts where you have systems of white supremacy in existence. Um, so it was used, like I said, as a word to oppress and vilify, denigrate Black people. And so the trauma caused by the use of the word is still very fresh in the memories of people who have been oppressed by it for generations. But the striking thing is that after a while, Black people, especially in the US, had the way of to sort of remove the venom, they remove the oppressive sense and power invested in the word, so as to rehumanize themselves, so as to be able to live better with themselves. And then so it became a sort of term of endearment. That term of endearment was popularized in African American, Black American culture, particularly hip hop, which is the most dominant musical genre in the world, the most dominant. There's no, I mean, it's become the most dominant. And as a result of that, the usage of the term and the word the N word has spread to all areas, all parts of the world virtually, which has been it has been adopted, for instance, in Africa, with people who don't have perhaps the right sort of context to understand that this is a particularly oppressive word, and also that the fact that we must recall that even though um, these are neo-colonial countries in Africa, they are still basically governed by a black majority or black majority. For instance, if you mention Lagos, Nigeria, I mean, it's the most populous black nation in the world, and it's also obviously black dominated politically, even though perhaps it's still a sort of neo-colonial um, country. But by and large, it's a black dominated country. So is South Africa, but South Africa does have a different kind of history because it was ruled for a very long time by a white minority population, and the ways in which racism and racial domination has played itself out is very peculiar here in South Africa. You only have a few examples in Africa, like Namibia, for instance, to a certain extent, perhaps Mozambique, Angola, and of course Zimbabwe, which, as we know, overthrew the white minority government through, eventually. So how the political arrangements in these various countries in terms of white supremacy or white domination, white minority rule was established and and entrenched plays a role rather in how the the N word has evolved and what it means in those contexts. But so it will still be oppressive for instance, a white South African to use the N word like casually. I mean, because it does cause, it's called the K word here. It's called the K word, not the N word. And it's a similar thing. And it's caused a lot of tension and turmoil and all kinds of conflict. So there's because of the history, peculiar history of apartheid domination and the realities of it, and the aftermath of coping with the traumatic events and processes involved in apartheid rule. So I mean, the like I said, there are differences in the ways in which the N word is felt and perceived in these various contexts, African contexts, and what makes it so poignant in particular context like South Africa is that South Africa has a particularly recent experience with racial oppression, which ended in 1994, as you know,
Right.
officially.
Right,
Okay.
and thank you so much for that very rich comment, Professor. I mean, a lot has been said there, but I think key things that struck me is that essentially it's experienced the same because nonetheless, the starking difference is of course fundamentally the fact that Nigeria is currently as a matter of fact, a country run entirely by black people and the people of of indigenous to that area, right? Whereas perhaps in the USA it's a different context where it's a white majority government and the black population there's a minority. So that's a huge context in what the N word means to people in America, African Americans, and perhaps Nigerians in Nigeria, and an interesting difference between then black people in South Africa with their recent episode of apartheid, which recently just ended. So yes, now, Doctor, I'd like to really bring your attention to this question, and as pop culture, especially on social media, will let somebody of my young age, the N word is commonly used to refer to one another among, within the African American community. And as you said, the not just the African American community dominates music and pop culture in so many ways, for I think other Black communities around the world. And one thing that is definitely evident is that, using the N word, as you said, as sort of like the N word has evolved to become an empowering word, and as I think through that agenda, sort of transformed into a word that is used in day-to-day lives, within the African American community, and some instances, I think also within friend circles in Namibia, at least in my experience. But what is your take on the usage, though, right? On the casual usage of the N word, and is it appropriate for friends in Lagos, Nigeria, to sort of use it to use the N word as casually and in the same way as I guess young African Americans tend to refer to one another, in their conversations and so forth?
That's a very perceptive question. You see, as Africans, as Africans, we've we've gone through the most genocidal experiences. The experience of slavery, where for about 400 years, our brothers and sisters all over the continent were being stolen and taken to the Americas systematically. They destroyed with this, our traditions, our institutions, our economy, so many things. Our lives were disrupted. And, it was like, it was a form of genocide. It was a living death. It was hell. And we must always remember this. But a lot of us are not educated or in a position to know about this very, very distressing history, this very troubling history. And then even some of us don't even know how oppressive a lot of the colonial systems that were established by colonial masters in Africa were. In Namibia, where you are, Germany has just agreed to pay 1 billion euro to the Herero and the Hama people over the genocidal experiences that they had to deal with in the 20th century, whereby some people were wiped out to the extent of 80% of the population. That kind of experience is not unique in Black history. We know what the Belgians did in the DRC too, how the oppressive ways in which they developed their economic systems, stole from the people, killed the people, maimed them, cut off their arms and limbs, and so this was also because of they were seen in a certain way for, they were Black people, and so they were the N word too. In this context, even though it isn't said in their local languages, but it became a very, to be Black anywhere in the world was very oppressive. Under colonialism, under slavery, under apartheid. So it is the duty of our societies, of our leaders to explain this, to impart this knowledge on younger generations so that they know exactly what their history is, what our history is, and the oppressive systems we had to endure, and the fight and struggles that were waged to liberate our people all over the continent and all over the world. So the N word is also an integral part of that history. We mustn't forget it. We mustn't just be almost to think that it's all what it's portrayed in pop culture, in hip hop or whatever. Even the conscious movement in hip hop knows this. They know this. They know how oppressive it is, and they are very aware of how white systems of oppression continue to manipulate our cultures and our history to benefit them and to continue to oppress us. So we must also do the duty, the work of educating ourselves about our history, about the systems of oppression that we had to endure, and about the struggles we waged to liberate ourselves, and not just the feel-good um, attitudes that we receive and celebrate in, in popular culture. That is a very, very minute part of the history. It's not the entire history. Other races or peoples who've been very oppressed take their history of oppression very seriously. It's sacrosanct, it's sacred, it's sacred. Similarly, we shouldn't be too keen to forget our history and not be aware of what we had to go through to come to get to this stage. Otherwise, the same systems of oppression will continue to find ways to dominate and humiliate and oppress us. So it's very important to arm ourselves with the knowledge of our history and the knowledge of our various struggles in order to confront the future.
Right. Thank you so much, Doctor. I just had to quickly navigate to unmute, but I think that's very profound. In that there is a minute sort of historical element and understanding thereof in pop culture, but so much more an iceberg that I think yeah, folks my age and others too need to understand, and very well said on that point. Well, with that question, I mean, with that comment, so many more questions, of course, I'm sure remain for me and yourself and the viewers too, about this word and its tremendous significance, right? I think not just in the American context, but really for all Black individuals around the world who somehow live a life interconnected um, with the N word or similar words like the K word that exists, in the South African or apartheid context. But it's been a pleasure kind of dissecting and understanding that together with you. And any last words before we sign off from you, Doctor?
Um, let's take our history seriously. Let's take our people seriously. Let's take our culture seriously. Let's take ourselves seriously. We're a beautiful and powerful people. Thank you.
Couldn't have said anything better than that. With all that said, thank you again. Thank you, listeners. This has been another episode of Umwe Sit Downs.